Baba.
Nice to have you on SaharaTV.
It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
We're looking at your current program that has to do with defeating imperialism in Africa through the Ballot or the barrel of the gun, which is the program you recently held here at your Can you provide an overview of the historical context of imperialism in Africa and its impact on the continent at this time?
Thank you very much. I think for us as global African people, our history with imperialism has unfortunately been one of the most turbulent in the history of humankind. I think in the history of societies, we would always have the emergence of imperialist forces. It doesn't really depend. Be it Asian history, European history, American history, there have always been situations where you will have the emergence of imperialist forces. But what that of the African continent or the history of the African people is quite different. The history of imperialism in Africa is quite different. Is that our experience with imperialism or with the imperialist forces have always been motivated through the instrument or the weapon of religion. And that clearly defines us differently from other people that have experienced imperialism. And what do I mean by this? The establishment of Arab imperialism in Africa wouldn't have been possible without the employment of the instrument or the religion of Islam. Within that same context, the establishment of European or white imperialism in Africa would not have been so dominant as it is today. I think they did not employ the usage of Christianity. So what that clearly means is that our history as African people, as far as imperialism is concerned, is extremely different. And that's why for us, in attending to these issues or the consequences upon which this experience of imperialism have created to us, we have got to address these issues differently. And in addressing these issues differently, we cannot shy away from the role of religion. We cannot shy away from the role of Islam. We cannot shy away from the role of Christianity. Towards the encampment of the entirety of the territories that we understand to be Africa today. The dominance of Arabs today in North Africa is nothing but the product of Arab imperialism motivated by Islam. The dominance of European societies, neo-colonial societies in Africa today is also a product of European imperialism motivated by Christianity. So for us, the about 500 years experience we've had with the imperialist forces, with the Arabs, with the Europeans. These experiences are extremely different, are extremely terrible, so much so that you cannot begin to analyze it without not pinpointing, the extreme consequences that we have to deal with.
Talking about the extreme consequences, what impact does it have on the continent out there?
Oh, massive for us. We think that the African society today, we as Africans, as global African people, we are suffering from what we call the post-traumatic slave syndrome. As Africans, basically, whether we like it or not, we are suffering from one sickness or the other. It's either we are suffering from Arab sickness or we are suffering from European sickness. Arab sickness in the sense that it's either your worldview or your attraction or your existence to life is extremely motivated by how best you can become an Arab through the basis of you being a Muslim, or you are being motivated to live, to exist on the basis of how much you can be a good Christian or a good European in a way. So that in itself talks about the fact that we are living today as Africans without not understanding the purpose upon which we ought to be existing. The best Africans today are those that think like Arabs. The best Africans today are those that think, that reason like Europeans. There's beyond all of these facts for us to pinpoint to, and beyond this question of identity, because what I've been addressing so far is the question of identity. How the existence of imperialism has destroyed our cultural heritage, has destroyed our cultural identity, existence as African people. Beyond that, the political and socio-cultural, beyond that, the political and socio-economic effects, consequences of imperialism are so massive that we cannot begin to go into. It speaks about the fact that we have government today who do not represent our interests. It speaks to the fact why we have the dominance of agents of international finance capital in our economies. It speaks to the fact why we have IMF, where we have World Bank, where we have agents of the Bretton Woods institutions deciding the buying and selling of the entirety of whatever resources that we have in our homeland. It explains why we are in this perfect mess today. It explains why we have the crisis of Japan. It explains why the mass of African people are leaving the continent in mass, what you can call mass exodus. All of these issues are related. Our experiences, the consequences of imperialism is responsible for why we have brain drain. When everybody, African men and women, are moving away on daily basis from the continent, to the so-called greener land in search of greener pastures. And so all of these facts speaks to one thing: if our homelands, having been invaded by the Arab imperialists, by the European imperialists, perhaps we would have a perfect African society.
Now, there have been different arguments, especially countering imperialism in Africa. Some of these arguments have been using the ballot box as a means of defeating imperialism in Africa. Do you share your perspective on this?
I think it is nothing but a mirage, and it's not acceptable in any way. No society in history, there's no society in history that has defeated imperialism through the ballot. You cannot point to me a society when the Chinese were going to get the British out of their society. They fought. It wasn't through the ballot. It wasn't through the ballot. When the Russian revolutionaries were going to get, the oligarchs, the ruling class in Russia, when they were going to fight that particular revolution, it wasn't through the ballot. It was through the bullet. They employed the usage of the bullet. No oppressed, as far as the history of human societies are concerned, have gotten freedom through the usage of ballot. You cannot be when the Americans were going to get rid of the English, they didn't do that through the ballot. They did that through violence, what we call the American, revolution, the American War of Independence. So people must understand the fact, so that when they're telling us today that in order for us to be able to get rid of Arab imperialism, in order for us to be able to get rid of European imperialism, that we need to vote, no, that's nothing but madness. That's a misconception that we cannot allow, that we cannot accept as global African people. So our people that are fighting in the West African francophone countries through violence, we are supporting their nation. We are supporting what they are doing, because you cannot get rid of French imperialism through the ballot. It is almost impossible, because the ballot system itself is hypocritical. Western democracy is nothing but an emblem of hypocrisy. You cannot get liberation through that kind of system. You cannot get liberation by voting. People must understand this fact, because you cannot have election in Africa without not having, the mismanagement, mass mismanagement of our funds. That's the reality. Every other time we have these elections, but nothing to turn out stuff. In order for you to be able to engage yourself in any electoral system in this country, you must have stolen wealth. To say that I want to come out publicly now and go for the post of a commissioner for an instance, or a member of House of Assembly, I must have stolen wealth. In order for me to be able to afford the resources that involves electioneering in this country, how do you explain it? The last election held in this country is the most expensive that have ever been held in Africa, and we have been having this like to 2015. The most expensive elections held in Africa are consistently being held in Nigeria since 2015. But what have we benefited from these so-called bourgeois backward elections? What have we had? Other than homelessness, joblessness, poverty, mismanagement of the entirety of the resources of the homeland. So for us, we are not interested in this backward electoral system that is so hypocritical. See, if the bullet is going to get us what we want, not be it.
So, let's get this into over context. What arguments are we doing now with regards to resorting to the barrel of the guns as an approach in countering imperialism in Africa?
Malcolm X once said something. When Malcolm X was told by the bourgeois American media outlets that he did not sympathize with the assassination of JF Kennedy in America. When JF Kennedy was assassinated in America, Malcolm X was interviewed by the American press that what does he have to say with respect to that? Malcolm X said something very, very important and very, very insightful. He said that in the case of the assassination of Jeff Kennedy, it is nothing but a situation of the chicken coming home to roost. That is what we are experiencing today in Africa. Our chickens are coming home to roost, and no one can stop that. That's the point. That's the facts of history. You know, you've treated people like animals. You've dehumanized us. You know what it is to be an African today. What it means to be an African today is to be a hopeless person. Someone without future. Many of us who are existing within society, we don't know what tomorrow will be. Our existence tomorrow is not guaranteed in Africa. And amazingly, Africa right now owns the largest number of youths all over the world. So you have an army of youths that are useless, that have been rendered to be useless, homeless, backward, and you are not expecting a resistance. I think if that resistance is going to come through bloodshed, they shouldn't be surprised. You know, because you have an army of people that are poor, and then the youth across the African continent cannot take it. Look at what is happening in Gabon. Look at what is happening in Niger. Look at what is happening in all of these countries. Mass of youth are supporting, and they don't care. They don't care if it's military or civilian. They don't care. Just get rid of French imperialism.
You mentioned specific examples of African history where the use of the barrel of the gun successfully been used to counter imperialism. You also cited the international experiences from it. So what are there lessons that we can learn as Africans from this?
Lessons. Well, you know, Kwame Nkrumah wrote a book called Struggle in Africa. And in that book, Kwame Nkrumah was making reference to why military coups happen in Africa. And Kwame Nkrumah made it very clear that military coups are not but reflection of the social changes, socio-economic changes in the society. Military coups are products of class forces. In fact, Kwame Nkrumah classified military coups simultaneously with the question of, class struggle. That military coups are not but manifestation of the existing class struggle. If societies are okay, the military will not pick to the guns. Because they won't get the support of anyone. Look at what is happening in Gabon. Mass support. But you see, when Kwame Nkrumah was dealing with the concept of military coups in Africa, he was conscious of one thing. And that's why Kwame Nkrumah made two classifications of military coups in Africa. The actionary military coups and revolutionary nationalist military coups. In the sense that you will have some elements that will come into power through the barrel of guns. They will say that they want to transform the economy of the country, but they won't do so. They will destroy the economy. In fact, far worse than what they meant. When the Babangida came on board in this country, they came up with that understanding, with that rationale that they were going to transform the economy of the country. But we all know how it went down. How Babangida destroyed the entirety of the economies of the country. But the point being made is that you have a Babangida, but you also have a Thomas Sankara. In Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara transformed the entirety of the economy of that country overnight. So that for us to understand clearly that it is not about how you get into power. It's about what to do with power. The question of what to do with power is the ultimate. I can come into power through the ballot of gun, I can come into power through the ballot. But extremely, what do I do with power when I come into power is the most important and the most fundamental thing. But right now we are saying, for people like us, the common people, the members of the lower class, to be able to come into power in this country, we are not guaranteed of the part of ballot. We are not. No one in this society is guaranteed of that fact. No matter how genuine you are, no matter how sincere you are, no matter how benevolent you are, the point is that the Nigerian electoral system as characterized today is extremely dear for the rich. It's extremely dear for the rich. No more, no less. That's the reality. And that's why the mass of African people must know today, the mass of Nigerian people must know today that to hell with this electoral system, to hell with INEC, to hell. And I'm not saying this because of what Peter Obi. I'm not a fan of all of those bourgeois elements. I'm not a member of Labour Party. I'm not a member of all of these backward political parties. But I'm saying this essentially for the defense and the protection of the interests of the common people in our streets, the common men and the common women, those that think that this electoral system, defend or can protect their interests. They should come out from their slumber. They should wake up and understand the fact that this electoral system as currently constituted is not meant for them. It's not to defend their own interests.
Now let me get into your perspective on this. Are there hybrid approaches or alternative strategies that blend both peaceful and army systems to address imperialism effectively?
You see, the point is that if you look at nations where major transformations have taken place in Africa, you understand that they didn't do so through the ballot system. It's a fact. It's a fact. And that's why for some of us we should not continue to parrot this Western bourgeois electoral system. You know, you ask me of experiences, I mean cases, societies that have been transformed through the existence of military regimes. They are so enormous, whether perhaps not so enormous within the context of African history, but globally they are. In Latin America, you have Cuba is what it is now because of the existence of, you know, the remnant of the revolution led by Fidel Castro. Of course, a military guy. You know, no matter how much you talk about it, the economy of, Burkina Faso is what it is again today because of some of the productive legacies of the regime of Thomas Sankara. The point is that if you are going to be a military leader in this society, in the African society, you must have a logical understanding of what is wrong with your society. You must clearly understand firstly that the institution that produced you is in fact a neo-colonial institution. I am not a strong praiser of the military institution in Africa. In fact, I hate the military institution. And I have to tell you, the level of hatred I share for the military institution in Africa is beyond just, it's beyond what you can take for levity. I'm saying this because the military institution is responsible for why the African economy and the African society today is backward. The military institution is one of the institutions created by the colonial states to hold the African people down. That's the reality. When the colonialists came, when the French came, when the Belgians came, when the Italians came, when all of these colonialists came to Africa, three institutions that they created out of the people that they use essentially to exploit and oppress the people. The civil service, they created the civil service, and that's why the civil service today is such a mess. The Nigerian civil service, you cannot get anything productive done. The ministries, the civil service was created by the colonial state, and that's why the civil service will not defend the interests of the people. Aside from the civil service, the traditional rulers, all of the traditional rulers that exist in our societies today, they are nothing but product of complicit elements in the destruction of our identity, in the destruction of our economy. All these very traditional rulers, Oba, kings, they are useless elements because they were remodified by the colonial state. Don't forget the indirect rule system employed by the British. All of these traditional rulers, those that we call Ajib, that's the name we give them, any government in power, they don't have minds of their own. You know, they have been playing this role since the days of colonialism. This, compensatory role. This, wash my hand kind of role and all of that. They have been playing that role. That's why we don't reckon with the traditional rulers. Beyond the traditional rulers is the military institution, the police, the military. The police, the military, the armed forces were created in Africa especially to oppress the African people. The military institution created them for one purpose, to destroy the economy of Africa, to help them in the process of colonizing us, to destroy us. And that's why we would say that the military institution in Africa was created for the maintenance of law and order. Law and order, it doesn't really matter. That's why the police is still playing that role today. That's why the army is still playing the role today. They are playing the roles of maintenance of law and order on behalf of the people rulemakers.
Now, finally, in your opinion, what are the prospects and challenges for Africa in defeating imperialism in the 21st century, considering the evolving geopolitical space, landscape that we have now?
Well, Charles Fanon said that each generation, out of relative obscurity, would always have a mission. You discover that mission or you betray it. The mission of African people today is to unmask imperialism, neo-colonialism, and defeat neo-colonialism. The mission of our forebearers, the mission of the generation of the newcomers of the world was to defeat colonialism, was to fight colonialism. But then, in defeating colonialism, from one problem to the other, the defeat of colonialism created the problem of neo-colonialism that we have to defeat today in Africa. And you and I, we have the ultimate duty. Firstly, we must identify who are the enemies of Africa today. The enemies of Africa are within the context of two things. You have the agent of international finance capital, the IMF, World Bank, and their sympathizers and their agents across Europe, across London, across Washington, and all of these so-called capital cities of the world. These are the enemies of African people. They are the ones that forces all of these useless elements that we have in power to take to austerity measures. They are the ones that are deliberately giving the mission of the destruction of our economies. These are useless people that we have to fight. Whenever you see IMF, World Bank agents, whenever you see their projects, know that you are seeing the enemies of the African people. Next to that are the useless leaders that we have, the backward leaders, the Tinubus of the world, the Nana in Ghana, the useless guy in South Africa. All of these useless guys are the second enemies that we have in Africa. They are the enemies of the African people because they are not using the resources of the African people to develop, the African people. They are using our resources to oppress us, to exploit us, to hold us down. Essentially, these two elements are responsible for why colonialism, why imperialism is still formidable in Africa. With the destruction of these two elements, you can be rest assured that Africa will rise. But let me also say this, that the military coups happening right now across the West African Francophone countries is also a pointer to one thing. It's a pointer to the fact that the days of the African ruling class is now counted. It's now a pointer to the fact that they themselves, their existence is not being certain anymore because the African people are rising up against them. It is a pointer. That's why for us it doesn't even matter. The coups can be reactionary, but what that means, as Kwame Nkrumah has taught us, is that it is a reflection that even members of the ruling class are now shaking. Members of the ruling class they are going haywire. They do not even know the right direction anymore. So we do not even care whether it is reactionary or revolutionary. What we mean is that the African masses are rising up, and it's just a matter of time before the African ancestors will give us the necessary power to be able to fulfill this mission in defeating colonialism.
Maberu, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.